Well, fall is in the air, and since there seems to be a contractual obligation for critics to work over things that are supposed to be spooky, here we are with Princess Resurrection. How do I talk about a show with such an utterly uninteresting premise without giving away that I hate it? Oops. You know, it's funny. When I watched Monster Musume, I was thinking, ugh, they didn't even try. When I watched Angel Sanctuary, I was thinking, there really was no hope for this one out of the gate. Apparently, if my sources are to be believed, Princess Resurrection had a pretty good manga run. And the only thing worse than an adaptation of a crappy manga is a crappy adaptation of a good manga. So, yes, let me go on record as saying that this show wishes it could be considered garbage. And I'm saying this after watching a show about incest and angel bullshit. It doesn't move, the characters are uninteresting, and while there are cute nods to classic movie monsters, it's not nearly enough to be worth 13 episodes, let alone the 26 that this ran to. Alright, fine, I'll give you the synopsis. This kid gets killed and turned into a zombie, and everyone in the universe suddenly wants his nuts, because... reasons. This is, of course, in spite of him having literally no talents or usefulness. I know I make that joke pretty often about these characters, but seriously... Hiro, our main character, has nothing going for him. The woman who turned him into a Zamboni, or whatever cute name the kids give to zombies these days, is a princess of the monster realm, and he's pressed into her service now. I want you to take 2 seconds to imagine how this could be interesting. Then I want you to take all those ideas and crumble them up and throw them in the fire, because interesting or complex anime isn't in vogue lately. No, we're here for the monster harem for like the 15th time. So when you get press-ganged into Hime's service, and yes, the princess's name is Hime, you don't get weapons, armor, training, or anything else. Nope, you get your fists and the worst luck in the world, because you are absolutely 100% boned. Even though it's your job, you don't get any sort of weapons, training, or protection to keep this girl from getting killed by all these freaking monsters. I suppose that this little nobody has the power of heart or something, but when you're facing off against mummies, that ain't gonna help you much, Mac. Rounding out our cast of characters in more ways than one is Hiro's big sister, who's about as sharp as a sack of wet mice, and is a maid at Hime's mansion. Hime also has a tiny robot named Flander to help her out, who can only say, "Huga." Why? Who knows? Who cares? Why does anything happen in this series? But like it or not, their absolutely unremarkable adventures begin. You'd think that getting vampires, werewolves, fishmen, mummies, and all manner of other creatures in the same place would be somehow interesting, but they make a really concerted effort to just be as dull as dish soap. I swear this series is trying to turn me into a nihilist. The biggest problem here is, why do we give a fuck? A lot of the time, your story will follow someone the audience can relate to, so you can bring that character into a larger, more fantastical world. Star Wars did it, Lord of the Rings did it, Gundam does it pretty well most of the time. You want a character that's easy for the audience to get their heads around, so you can show them fantastical things and show them growing into a different character. That's called character development. With Princess Resurrection, there's none of this. I don't see how anyone could relate to Hiro, since he really doesn't do anything of his own volition, and he doesn't have anything resembling a personality. More and more as I watch anime these days, I see characters who shouldn't even be background characters getting leading roles. Here's the thing though, it's okay to have a character who is outwardly uninteresting if you give them some sort of redeeming feature. I point to Nagasumi from My Bride as a Mermaid. He doesn't really have a lot in the way of character personality, but he's surrounded by very extreme characters who make how normal he is stand out more. And he becomes extremely devoted and dedicated to Sun. His devoted nature turns him into Captain Badass when the chips are down, and it makes his journey from boy to young man resonate and feel real. I just want to reiterate that this genre of story is not doomed from the outset, but if you make your character's main take on it, "I don't want to be here," the only people who won't want to be around are your audience. Even Skune from Rosario Plus Vampire had a little more to him than Hiro here, because at least Skune stood up for the ladies in his life. Hiro merely stumbles and fumbles around, puppeted along by Hime. And to be perfectly honest, I'm pretty sure he lacks the necessary higher brain functions to complain. So here's the thing. If at any point there would have been some sort of emotional connection between Hiro and Hime, something like him saying, "You gave me purpose," or her saying, "I need you," in any way, shape, or form, that might have salvaged this show. But that's not part of it. What we get is, "Dude," and "You're my servant now, ha. Better hope I don't forget to keep you alive." Hiro has no agency in his own story, and that is an extremely bad thing. So character agency, for those of you who aren't particularly in the know, is when your character has some sort of actual effect on the plot itself. That really doesn't sound like that heavy come by, now does it? When your characters are just kind of existing, or are prodded along by the great hand of plot convenience, you're doing it wrong and you need to stop. Characters without agency are just puppets with the writer's hands up their asses, and it's not any fun to watch. Which brings me back around to here. Hime somehow manages to get damseled without even batting an eyelash, because technically she's the reason all these critters are coming to her house and trying to kill her. She's an heir to the demon world, so she has to be removed from the line of succession for one of her other siblings to get the throne. Hime doesn't really seem to care about it and seems content to sit around sipping tea and being odd, but it doesn't seem to stop anyone else from trying to murder her. Which brings me to the next issue. They try to make up for whatever character deficiencies they have by just bringing new ones in. Don't introduce new recurring characters, do more with the ones you have. So by the end of the first season, we have Riza the werewolf, Rayri the vampire, some other robot, and Sherwood the Lolita, which I'm pretty sure is a fucking monster archetype in itself at this point. All joining with Hime and Hiro to be bland and not do anything. They have about as much character development as you should expect, which basically means they show up in a shot, say a thing, and then remain in the background, often badly drawn. Yes, because it's not enough to have this just be a sequence of pretty pictures, it's also a sequence of shitty pictures. I'm particularly amazed by the eye catch cards, because they somehow pulled them off of DeviantArt before the show was even out. I mean, who knew, right? But yes, characters often appear without things like shading, or their figures are off. Hiro is a particularly big culprit because his design is so bland that I think they actually forget he's there in some of these shots. I've seen Flash animations from 2003 with better animation and more care put into it than this show. The money would have been better spent on basically anything else. But here we are. As I understand it, the anime has been tamed down from the manga according to most reports, which means that the original work is a lot gorier and goes in a wildly different direction. I don't want to say that removing gore is a death sentence, but it usually is, and Princess Resurrection is proof positive. There needs to be a guy that stands behind every mangaka or anime writer with a bat, asking why we should care about what's happening. And if they can't give a decent answer, then wham! This is just a waste of time and energy to even put on TV. It was a waste of time and energy to dub, and it's an even bigger waste of time for anyone to watch it. The only horror available in this is putting this frightful beast in front of your eyes.